Here are the sheets for you, Reuven. So what we're going to do today is we're coming to the end of this topic, but it leads us into our next topic. So I'm not going to go over the Maramakomis we've seen already, but after the Shevet HaLevi, if you look at the last 3 pages, is a document from the OU. The last 3 pages is the OU's policy, yes, the new one that I gave you. It's the one which says on the front cottage cheese. The last 3 pages starts at the top. It says document A162. This is an internal document of the OU, their policies, their Kashrus policies. Okay? So we're going to read it through and then see this Torah that goes with it. So document A162 of the OU is soft cheese doesn't require Gvinas Yisrael, dated November 2003. Let's see. So it says milk can be curdled into cheese with rennet or acid. We've been through this, so we don't need to go through it. The 2 different procedures. Cheeses such as cheddar, Munster, mozzarella, Romano, Parmesan, and provolone are curdled with rennet, and they are referred to as hard cheese, and definitely require Gvinas Yisrael because we don't pass like Rabbinerseminar, etc. Right. On the other hand, the OU certifies soft cheeses, such as yogurt. And we're going to go, each of these is going to get subdivided, not today, but this is for future reference. Okay, yogurt, sour cream, cottage cream, and farmer's cheese that are curdled with acid. These are acid-set cheeses, even though they do contain a little bit of rennet. We've been through this already, but they don't require Gvinas Yisrael. The Igros Moshe that we've been through, we've learnt this Igros Moshe, so they, you can't say they're relying on the Igros Moshe, because why can't we say that? Who remembers?
Well, because they're going before Hesia and say we're relying.
Right, because that's right, because the Igros Moshe gave the Lomdus why it should be mutter, but when it came Lamaisa, he wasn't matter Lamaisa. But, so this is the first part. Igros Moshe,
but
not lechatchila, not b'shofi, like he wrote in his Tshuva to Reb Shimon Schwab, as we saw. Igros Moshe explains the logic of this position is the original Gezerah was established because of concern that a non-Jew would use non-kosher rennet. Point number 2 is milk will curdle naturally into a soft cheese. I don't need the addition of any rennet or any other ingredients. The acid is only added to hasten the process. As such, soft cheeses shouldn't be viewed as cheese as relates to the Gezerah. Because if the Gezerah was based on that you mamid it, the derech is to be mamid it with kevas nevela, then you can have a low plug and you can start saying, even if you mamid it with asovim, but this is not a cheese, it can't be. According to Says Moshe, the logic is very compelling. There's no way to suggest this could have been included in the Gezerah because it's different, b'mareh, b'ta'am, and the whole process. I don't need anything. They don't need to do anything. Put it out in the sun if you want, and you'll end up with soft cheese. Fine. This position seems to be a debate in the Achronim as follows. Number 1, Igros Moshe himself is unwilling to permit the cheese and merely concludes one shouldn't protest those who accept it. Over the page. Number 2, Chochmas Adam and Aruch HaShulchan that we saw, they state that our simple or common cheese that has no hamad at all requires Gvinas Yisrael, which seems to imply that even soft cheese requires Gvinas Yisrael. However, other statements by the Aruch HaShulchan seem to indicate that he held these cheeses do not require Gvinas Yisrael. I didn't show you that. There is another Aruch HaShulchan which he equivocates a bit more, but maximum it's a little bit of a worst case scenario. It's a bit of a contradiction, but doesn't really help me very much. Okay. Number 3, Shevet HaLevi in a Tshuva to Moshe Bernstein Zal. We saw this Shevet HaLevi. That's the one we went through already. He says the issue is based on the debate between the Pri Chodosh and the Chasam Sofer as to how to understand the Gezerah. Is, very quickly, just to recap it, the Chasam Sofer says anything that has a Shem Gevina was included in the Gezerah, irrespective of whether it requires Ha'amada, and the Pri Chodosh said, no way. The Pri Chodosh says, there's nothing magical about the term. We saw this inside in the Shevet HaLevi. So, therefore, the OU questions itself and says as follows, in light of the above, why are the OU and all of the other American hashgachas lenient regarding this issue? I need to take issue with the OU, because they say all the other American hashgachas, that's not true. Rav Moshe Heinemann and the Star K do not. So it's a little bit, I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, but they say all the other American hashgachas. There is a significant and quite an important player in the field, which is Star K, Rav Moshe Heinemann, is one of the Gedolei HaPoskim in America today, and was in 2003 already was, and they do not rely on the so-called heter of Reb Moshe. As we're going to see, it's not the heter of Reb Moshe, it's actually the heter of Rav Henkin. We're going to come to that in a minute. But just for the record, that most, I think it is definitely fair to say, most hashgachas in America certainly take the lenient opinion, except for the Star K. So really here, the OU, what they've done in this document, as they do, if you're familiar with their documents, is they're asking a question on themselves. They're saying, we are Mekel, how can we be Mekel? Reb Moshe himself wasn't Mekel lechatchila. Yeah, he just told Reb Shimon Schwab, don't go and stone your whole entire community. You can, especially if they might not listen to you, etc. There's room to be mekel, but lemaisa lechatchila he wasn't mekel. Chachmas Adam and Aruch HaShulchan, who are gedolei achreidim, are machmer. Shevet HaLevi says it's a machlekes Pri Chodesh and Chasam Sofer. So why, when it comes to something like this, why do we say Sofek Drabanan? Why don't we paskin? What's going on over here? So first is this question. The posek of the OU was Rabbi Yisrael Belsky, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, he was one of the Gedolei HaPoskim, and in America he was the posek of the OU, and he wrote them the following tshuva: Da. Ki kvar noagu kol irgunei hahechshel asis kein milifnei 60 shana v'yoser al pi hachroas hagoyin ha'adir moran Rabbi Yosef Eliyahu Henkin Zatzal shechishev kol eile lechema v'lo legvina. Rav Henkin, now I must add, this psak of Rav Henkin, which is very well known in the field, is very well known, as far as I can tell through my research, is not to be found anywhere biksav. In his tshuvas, in his various other, what was it called, Ivra, it's not to be found biksav. It is but it is an edus from his Talmidim Muvhakim, and nobody's questioning whether it's genuine. Of course it is, right? But, just for the record, Rav Henkin Paskand, more than 60 years ago, writes Rav Belsky in 2003. Okay? So we're going back 60 years. That here's the Lomdus, he considered these products, yogurt, soft cheeses, to be classified halachically as chem'ah. We will be having a few sessions on butter. We'll get to that because that's a fascinating topic and very relevant today, especially if you live in a place where the cost of kosher butter is prohibitive, or you can't get kosher butter, and then we'll go into Deutsche Markenbutter and all the other various. I've got extensive some correspondence with them, and etc. Really interesting to understand modern butter production. We'll get to that. But the bottom line is, now, chem'ah is mutter. Now, why chem'ah is mutter? Let's put a pause under that for a minute. Let's just take that for granted for the moment. We'll do the Rambam and the Sugya. We might even start the Sugya today. But that's the Lomdus. He considered all of these to be chem'ah v'lo legvina, brackets, v'ushra al yidei mashemosar hagoyin Merav Tuvia Goldstein Zatzal Bishmai, one of his Talmidim of Hakim, also the famous posting of Tuvia Goldstein, who wrote Eimek Halacha, if I'm not mistaken, Shuvas Eimek Halacha, and he said over in his name, right, Ubet Kufazu, and in that era, so we're talking 60s, now we're talking nearly 80 years ago in America, Nispashet HaHoira Laheta, Hoya Hagoyin Rav Henkin Zal HaPoisek HaRoshi Bimdinosenu. At that time, either Reb Moshe had not yet arrived, I'm not sure, I'd have to actually check biographically. I don't know this off the top of my head, but even if he had, Rav Henkin was not only there first, but Rav Henkin is very interesting edus from Rav Belsky, who's telling us that now, coming up to 80 years ago, as we say today in 2025, 80 years ago in America, there was no question, Rav Henkin was the Posek Hadoir, and that was his psak, udvarov niskablu al kol hachugim mibli irur. His psak was accepted in the Alakreiser, all of them. There was no Lakewood then yet, yeah? They were all accepted with bli irur. Umei oilam lo nistapek ba'odam. And nobody ever questioned that psak. Al af shemoron agoin balo igris Moshe yotza achakach lefakfeik. Even though subsequently Reb Moshe queried it. Now, he's calling the shit of Reb Moshe querying it. Why? Even though Reb Moshe is quite clear, holds that me'ika hadin, and certainly in a b'diavad situation, or certainly if somebody's not going to listen, or then it's me'ika hadin, it's mutter. But he calls that lefakfeik. You with me? It's really interesting. Ume'oz v'ad ota nohagu kein etzel kol oichlei cholov hacompanies bimdinosenu poi. Now, let's get this clear, because this is going to segue us very neatly into our next topic shortly. We've still got another page of Torah to learn. Notice what he says. He says, from that moment on, anybody who relies on what is known euphemistically as cholov hacompanies, because that is the language Reb Moshe used in his tshuvas. So in America, those that have what you and I might call cholov stam, Reb Moshe called it cholov hacompanies, i.e. to rely on pikuach memshalti. And we'll leave that for, again, we'll have to do some sessions on that. Fascinating, different session. Yeah, Reb Moshe relied on cholov hacompanies. In other words, government supervision is, what was Reb Moshe's vort? In very, very, very brief and oversimplification, it is not cholov stam. I know there's no cholov tamei there, via the supervision methods and oversight of the companies. Reb Moshe was not, you have to be very careful the language one uses. Reb Moshe was not matir cholov stam. He doesn't take a gzeira chas v'shalom and throw it out the window. There's a gzeira, it's a mishnah in Avodah Zarah. You can't throw away a mishnah. Rabbein de kol alma. But people use the language, and words matter, as they say nowadays. Not your stupid pronouns.
It's a widening of the scope of Cholav Yisrael. It's a form of Cholav Yisrael.
That's right. Correct. He held that it is Cholav hacompanies is mutter. Now, so therefore says Rav Henkin, from that moment onwards, all those who are oichlei Cholav hacompanies in America. Now here he doesn't say everybody does that, like he said 2 lines ago. Because there is potentially another concern in soft cheese. And this is our next sugya. Right? But notice what he's doing here. He's very, Rav Belsky was a godel in halach and in Torah. He's using his words very carefully. He says, the etzem ha'heter, that it's considered chema and not gvina of Rav Henkin, was niskabel by everybody. But then he throws in a line at the end. And from then until now, everybody who eats cholov hacompanies has no problem eating cottage cheese, because relying on Rav Henkin. But he says that's only those who eat cholov hacompanies. There's a very strong mashmos in what he is saying, that somebody who is machmir and doesn't eat cholov hacompanies would not be able to avail themselves of Rav Henkin's heter of it being chema. I'm not explaining. I'm just pointing it out.
Even though if we say that it's like chema, it doesn't need to be chema.
Good point. I'm only reading.
That's the tricky point.
Yeah.
What's the correlation?
That's out exactly.
Sociological observation statements.
No. It's halachic. It's halachic. He's saying those who eat.
The group that follows this, they continue to
correct
thinking, even though they wouldn't have to rely on.
Well,
but what's the link?
We're going to see the link halachically. That's a very big statement, my friend. I can stay at home for the next 2 weeks. Well, that is our next. That is our next thing. Cholov stam for cheese production. We're going to go through the Rishonim. We're coming to that. We'll see. We will see. We're going to do the next. No. There's 2 sugyas coming up. Our next 2 sugyas are, number 1, cholov stam for cheese production, and it's very closely linked. You are right, to the whole topic of cholov stam for butter buying, and that again. Let's see that. We're going to get to that. But I do take your point, Eli. You actually make a good point. He says from that, Rav Belsky is saying from that point onwards, those who accepted Rav Henkin's psak legabe soft cheese, all those who eat cholov hacompanies have that. It's mashma that those that don't eat, and you're saying, well, what makesher? He's very strongly saying, he's not just observing. I don't think he's just observing. He's saying there is another halachic dimension here, and therefore it is those that are makel on cholov companies are now able just to have this cholov, this soft cheese. I'll explain. I don't know whether you've ever seen, you probably don't, if you ever noticed, on cheeses, in the Hebrew, sometimes it will say mishas asiya, and sometimes it will say mishas chaliva. Have you noticed? And so this is the point. So if it's mishas chaliva, well, and I suppose then it's got a hechsher, so it doesn't really, but mishas asiya, then you potentially, question mark, may have an issue with, but it's cholav stam. So is it only if I rely, in other words, and this is your question, I'm accepting your question.
To differentiate, so to say, between cholav stam and Israel.
Well, when you give a hechsher, when somebody will give a hechsher, sometimes some of the Dutch, the Samson cheese used to be, it said on it, mishas, you know, the soft, the blue spready cheese, the Samson cheese, it used to say on it, it says on it, it said, the hechsher, mishas asiya, meaning, we bought milk. Now, so what does that mean? Question, if you don't eat cholav companies, are you entitled to eat that cheese? And that's going to be our next sugya. Reb Henkin seems to be making a link. Let's go on. That was Rav Belsky's tshuva, and the next thing is Rav Shachter's. Over the page. You're looking at the wrong one, that's why. I gave you, there's an updated one here. There is an updated one. Here you go. There.
Thank you.
Back page now. Back page. Bizman HaTalmud, says Rav Shachter. Says Reb Hershel Shechter. Bizman HaTalmud, kanireh shekashe osu gvina raka, lo hishtamshu klal b'shum ma'amid. He's giving us more context, which we really have taught to you, and you know this anyway. It seems, he says, at the time of the Gemara, when they made cheese, soft cheese, they didn't use any ma'amid. V'dava zerak, huschal b'tkufa achroina. It was only brought in to use a mamid of some sort, to throw in a bit of rennet or whatever, or a culture, an enzyme, to speed up the process of that's really just for industrial production. Because the Gemara identifies potentially up to 8 different reasons for the gzeira for gvina sakum, and the one which is very popular, or the one which is very well known, and very likely the main reason, according to many poskim, is because the way to make regular cheese is to be mamid with oir kevas nevela. After harama hechmir kedas roiv Yerushalayim leser afilu b'humid basovim, even though it's true the rama is machmir as a loy plug, even if it's organic, it's bio, whatever, and you use something vegetarian to be mamid the cheese, mikol mokem b'gvina raka. However, soft cheese shebechlal ein bo davar amamid. Soft cheese, certainly Bisman Chazal, didn't involve any Davar HaMamid. So if that is the reason, he's really just reiterating Rav Moshe's logic. That's all he's doing. Therefore, it's impossible, implausible, and illogical to say that it was included in the Issa. Even though it is possible to push back and say, once Chazal forbade cheeses that are made via ha'amoda, nichlelu afelu agvinus harakois hanasa shaloi ba'amodas b'teres loy plug k'moi shematzinu b'rei gzeres Chazal shenzu b'ofen loy plug, which you and I know is the opinion of the Chasam Sofer, that because it's called cheese, that was the Chasam Sofer that the Shevet HaLevi brought, right? But can kosher loy makein de begvinas Yisrael, because what is the geder of Gvinas Yisrael? Now here, Rav Shechter says actually a very beautiful, if I may say so, he doesn't need my approbation, but he says a very beautiful svara, an elegant and simple svara. He says very geschmack. He says Gvinas Yisrael. So let's flip it round. He does something beautiful. Let's flip it round. Okay, so not Gvinas Akum. Let's talk about Gvinas Yisrael. What is the definition of Gvinas Yisrael? Can somebody please give me a definition of Gvinas Yisrael? You probably can't, because I haven't taught you yet the Machlekes Shach and Ramah. The question is it about ownership, or do you have to be actually involved in the process and the Mashgiach needs to throw the rennet in, blah, de blah, de blah. Okay? But it doesn't matter. But one thing is for sure, which whether you pass like the Ramah or the Shach, which we're going to get to in a later Shir, the Jew needs to do something. It's Gvina, which is, there's a connection to the Jew. It's Nasis al Yidei Yisrael. Lefi Hagdaras HaShach. Or lefi Kulas HaRamah, it's Gvina Nasis Tachas Pikuach HaYisrael HaRayehu. Ubigvina Raka, says Rav Shachter, Eza Asiya Yeshama. The whole concept of doing something is irrelevant. It's inappropriate. Not inappropriate. It's utterly illogical. It's irrelevant. There is nothing that you do. What do you need to do? Take it and put it out in the sun. You actually don't need to do anything. If you leave milk and do absolutely nothing, in the passage of time, you will end up with soft cheese. You don't need to do anything. So therefore, it doesn't even make sense to say, forget even the svara of Rav Moshe, which is also good. But he's adding. He's saying
the essence of the production, but not in reality. Meaning, in the very essence of the process, you don't need it, but in the how production is being conducted.
But how it was done then, not in those days. No. In the days of Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, you just left it out in the sun.
Okay.
You don't need to do anything. There's no way you can get hard cheese if you don't get involved and throw in rennet. It requires an asiyah.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's shaykh to say the asiyah should be done by a Jew, but not by a goy. Fine. Right. But there is no asiyah. The whole concept of asiyah makes no sense here. Eza asiyah yeshama. Kosher loymar, he says, it's difficult to suggest. Ma'ashem asimim bakbuk hacholov b'chama hainu asiyah has gevina. To take it out of the fridge and put it in the sun, that's asiyah. It doesn't logical. That's no logical. Look at the other way around. Let's say according to the Ramah, where the Ramah is Mekel says you don't need to throw the rennet in. You don't need any active involvement. You just have to watch it. So what do I need to watch exactly? What am I watching? Why do I need to watch a guy taking something out of the thing and putting it in the sun? It makes zero sense.
You watch so that he doesn't do something.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And if he does a Ramah, no, but there's no, you can't, because the whole thing is it won't be mamid. We'll come to that later. That's another thing. Nobody puts a mamid into soft cheese, so there's nothing to be mefakeach for. Cottage cheese shall nachon v'gam dvar of tzorchin gadol. You know the Chalkes Binyamin is. It's the son of the Badei HaShulchan. He's got a sefer also. Fine. So Rav Shachta, I think, has added a very elegant and very logical svara, which I think is very beautiful. There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Lamed Hey, which says that gvina lacha is osor. So he says you might think gvina lacha might mean soft cheese. He says no, that's not what it means. The Gemara talks about gvina lacha versus gvina yevesha. Ein habir bezed de lacha hainu gvina raka. Says Rav Shachta Pshat in the Gemara, it doesn't mean soft cheese. And the yevesha means hard cheese. Ela nirli de tarvayu gvina kosher kaima. They're both talking about hard cheese. The question is, lacha is at the beginning of the process, it still has some moisture. And yevesha means as it goes through the process and then becomes hard. That's how he says. V'chein hoya nirli she'ein b'yogurt mishum gzeira gvinas akum. Let's just throw this in, even though it's not our sugya now. It seems to be also that in the yogurt there's no problem with gvinas akum. Together gvina hainuk shemafridim es hakurds min avei. What is gvina? You separate the curds from the whey, the casein protein from the, if you want to be technical, from the other part of the protein. Yeah, we've spoken about the composition of milk, etc. But yogurt, ain't shama hafroda klal. There is no hafroda in yogurt. What you do is you put a culture into the milk, and everything, the thing itself, becomes coagulated. V'hakol nisaveh. The Stei Chemed brings a tshuva of the Chidah from the Yosef Oimetz, who understands in the Radvaz that yogurt is included in gvinas akum, udvar of tzarchin godel. The Stei Chemed himself writes, on the basis of and the name of the Chidah, that is not the simple understanding of the tshuva of the Radvaz. So that's Rav Shachta. Final point here is Shamati, is Rav Menachem Genak, who was head of the practical side, the rabbinic side of the OU, I think he still is. Shamati Mirav Alexander Stern Shlita Shahoya Ben Bayis Eitzel Agon Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal Shebebeisoi Shel Hagram V'Hishtamshu Begvinas cottage cheese Ba'ad HaRabbanit Zal Shahoya Tzorech La. Rav Moshe's Rebbetzin needed cottage cheese and they used it. Ubavadai Shesomach Al Madasova Demeika Hadin Gvira Raka Muteres. So you actually even have a Maaseh, not a Maaseh Rav, but a Maaseh Rabbanit, that the Rebbetzin, Rav Moshe's Rebbetzin, they had cottage cheese at home. He himself, Rav Moshe himself didn't even have a call of companies. There's a famous story, we'll get to it. He once had it by mistake, and he, in the house of his son-in-law, and he went to the side and he made himself throw up. That is Eidos.
Really?
Yeah. The Baal Nefesh, you'd be machmir for yourself is one thing, but he held it was though he had plates. I mean, he would answer to the Rabbinerseminar that it's okay. And here, I think we'll probably just stop for here. This is, so with this we end the
It's interesting that the wife used Kashrus when he said the only reason that we don't like publicly announce it is, I don't know, people won't listen and everything.
But because it's clear he held Me'ikah Hadin its mutter. But there needed to be a reason. Like we saw a bit in the Suri De'esh, remember? Similar sort of thing. So once it's Me'ikah Hadin its mutter, then presumably for some medical reason he's felt his wife needed that, then that becomes a Shas Adchak, and then it becomes a Lechatchila. For his Rebbetzin, it was, she had a need for it. With this we end, for the moment, this sugya. It segues us into the next sugya, which we will start on Monday, Yirtzeh Hashem, which is this other topic, which will also lead on to butter, and that is, assume you rely on, or even if you don't rely on, forget Rav Henkin or soft cheese, hard cheese. Right? There was a story. We'll just start one tiny detail. We'll start one tiny detail, and that is the Pri Chodosh brings the following story. Go to page 4. We'll just have a quick look, just to set it up. Okay. Page 4. Second, towards the end of the line in bold. Hagvino shemevim poi Yerushalayim mitzvas. The Pri Chodosh writes that you're in the wrong sheet. Next sheet. The Pri Chodosh says that they bring. Page 4. Second line, bold. The Pri Chodosh says the cheese that they bring here to Yerushalayim from Tzfas. Ki haYehudim asher hilchem sham la'asais hagvina. The Yidden that we send for the hashgacha to make the cheese, einam yicholim liris kol hachaliva. They can't observe the milking. Lefi sheha'eder hu godel ma'od mahalach dalad v'heishois. The cows are spread out there. It's a walk of 4 or 5 hours to go and see all of the milking. So what do? The cheese that we bring to Yerushalayim is observed from the moment that they've milked it without supervision, and then they supervise the cheese production. Is that mutter or not? I'm just setting up the shaila, and this is the sugya we'll start on Monday. Im Yirtzeh Hashem, Shkoyach.